everyone. Welcome to Inquirer Live at Gameday Central, sponsored by Borgata Hotel, Casino, and Spa, alongside EJ Smith. I am Olivia Reiner. We are coming at you live from Lincoln Financial Field, getting set for the Eagles' afternoon matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. EJ, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I was expecting this to be kind of a dreary, rainy day, but I'll be honest with you, it doesn't even feel like December right now, especially late December. So, no, I'm excited for the show. I'm excited for the game, and yeah, I'm excited to enjoy maybe a little bit of nicer weather than we were expecting.
Well, hopefully, wherever you are enjoying the nice weather as well. Hope you're having a great holiday time and you're getting set for the new year. As always, you can be a part of our conversation. Head on over to inquire.com/Eagles Game Day if you're not already over there. Throughout the game, we will be chatting with you, answering your questions. However, if you're there right now, you can leave us a question, a comment, and we will answer some of those toward the end of our show today. All right, EJ, let's get into the health report. Lots to discuss as it relates to the present health of the Eagles. The big one, and one that everyone should know by this point, Jalen Hurts is out with a concussion for today's game, which means that Kenny Pickett is the starter for the first time as an Eagle. He came in relief of Jalen Hurts when Hurts went down in the first quarter, and it was a bit of an up and down day for Kenny Pickett. His stat line officially finished the game with 14 24 completions for 143 yards and a touchdown and an interception. All in all, a 72 quarterback rating. He had some strong moments, obviously completing the touchdown there and some key conversions. However, there were also some moments where the timing just didn't seem like it was exactly what it should be. His accuracy wasn't always there. Now that Pickett has had a full week of practice under his belt to work with the first team offense, to try to create some sort of chemistry with AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, what are your expectations for him in today's game?
Yeah, I think you can reasonably expect it to look a little cleaner. Not to say that he wasn't always, like you said, I think up and down is a good way to describe the way that he played against the Commanders. He had some nice moments, and then there were times where it definitely showed that he hadn't played in a while and that he doesn't get a lot of reps with the first team offense. I think with the benefit of having a week to practice with those guys, like I don't know if our viewers always like really understand, like Kenny Pickett almost never throws the ball to AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. When you have a starting quarterback entrenched like Jalen Hurts, that quarterback is going to take all of those reps and kind of maximize as much as he can the time with those receivers. So the fact that Kenny Pickett had the week to work with those guys, kind of get into a rhythm in the first team offense, get used to the idiosyncrasies of all those players, I think that will be really important. Like the interception to AJ Brown that the interception when he was throwing to AJ Brown against the Commanders, that's the type of thing I would reasonably expect to not see as much of in his first start, now that he has a week of practice, to kind of have a better sense of where people are going to be. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if you can expect the world from him. I don't think you can expect him to play like Jalen Hurts necessarily plays, but I do think that you might be able to expect just a little bit more of a cleaner operation from Kenny Pickett now that he's had the week to prepare.
Mm-hmm. In addition to Hurts being out, Will Shipley is also out with the concussion that he sustained last week against the Commanders. Britton Covey heads to injured reserve for the second time this season, this time with a neck injury. We are still waiting on the status of Nakobe Dean. We'll get that for you in a moment. Actually, we should have it right now. Here it is. Nakobe Dean is inactive for today's game. So that's a pretty substantial loss for the Eagles in the middle of their defense. My expectation, because Oren Burks has been the third string linebacker all season long, is that he will also be the starter alongside Zach Bond with Dean inactive. What do we expect to see from that starting inside linebacker duo, EJ, given the fact that Dean, who has been a really reliable starter for them this season, is inactive?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that we don't really know what to expect. Oren Burks has played 43 total defensive snaps for the Eagles this season. He is kind of by trade a special teams ace. He is somebody that is good on special teams. It's kind of what he's been throughout his career. So what is he going to look like with extended playing time today? I think it's a valid question. It's a big question, especially because Nakobe Dean kind of lingered late into the week. I'm curious to see how Oren Burks integrates into the defense and whether or not Vic Fangio can sort of insulate him at times, be able to make, I would say, provide some cover for him, in certain situations, because, that's been a staple of this Eagles defense, is how good those two off-ball linebackers have played. So, yeah, I think it's a valid question. I wish I had a better answer for you, but I really don't. We haven't seen enough of Oren Burks to really know what it's going to look like with him getting extended playing time.
Absolutely. So while Dean is out, we know because we now have the inactives list that Bryce Huff is in. He was on injured reserve just for a couple weeks ago. The Eagles opened his 21-day practice window as he worked his way back after undergoing wrist surgery. He missed about 5 games or so. And now he is ready to go enter this edge rushers rotation that has been depleted over the last several weeks, not only due to his absence, but due to the fact that Brandon Graham tore his triceps against the Los Angeles Rams about a month ago and is out for the rest of the season. So with the re-entrance of Bryce Huff, what do you expect to see from him as he looks to try to regain his footing and try to end the season on a higher note than he left it after he got his surgery?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to remember the role that he had before the injury. He was definitely, in a diminished role, kind of as a situational pass rusher. I think he was starting to make some progress in terms of like in known pass situations where he can get in that 4-point stance and really explode off the ball from that wide alignment. We were starting to see like kind of the player that the Eagles were expecting when they signed him. An ability to impact the quarterback. So honestly, like the edge rusher rotation has held up reasonably well without him the last couple of weeks, and even with Brandon Graham out, Nolan Smith has really taken on his strides. Honestly, Jalix Hunt, I think he has moments where you kind of see the potential, and I think that he's been playing decently well. So, and obviously Josh Sweat has, been very productive for the group. So, I think that rotation needs the added depth, which I think is what Bryce Huff will provide. But I think for now he is more of a depth option than, somebody who's going to be featured. Now, maybe the fact that the wrist is fully healed or, more healed than it was before, maybe that means that he can be more impactful, in these games. I'm sure the Eagles would be delighted if he was. But yeah, I think for starters, he's probably going to be, kind of in the back end of that rotation, kind of just, again, adding some depth so that those guys can, rotate a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Let's take a look at now the Cowboys, kind of what their situation is right now. Big loss for them. Wide receiver CeeDee Lamb is out with a shoulder injury. He is now on injured reserve for the rest of the season. That's something that we knew going into today's game. Cornerback Amani Oruwariye is dealing with a foot injury. He is on injured reserve, one of their starters. So again, this is by no means a fully healthy Cowboys team, and they haven't really been for the majority of the season, especially dating back at least to the last time the Eagles and the Cowboys faced each other in week 10. One other note for the Eagles, they made a few moves yesterday, signing quarterback Ian Book to the active roster. That's just so he can serve as the emergency quarterback. He is inactive for today's game, but in order for him to be on the inactives, he needed to be on the 53-man roster to serve in that emergency role, just like Tanner McKee typically would. McKee is backing up Kenny Pickett today with Hurts out. And then 2 practice squad elevations in Tyrion Davis-Price and Dallas Gant. Davis-Price, a running back, takes over Will Shipley's spot in the depth chart. Also could potentially play some special teams for them. Same for Gant, but also, again, add some linebacker insurance. Get down in the depth chart with Nakobe Dean out for today's game. All right, let's get into some of the big news and storylines going into this matchup against the Cowboys. For the Eagles, once again, they have the division on the line. A win today would lock up the top spot in the NFC East. Even if the Eagles don't win, the Commanders could potentially do them a solid tonight with a loss against the Falcons, who have also a lot to play for. So they could also clinch a division with a loss from the Commanders. That is, I think, pretty important, EJ, considering the fact that next week against the Giants could end up being somewhat of a meaningless game for the Eagles if they are all but locked into that number 2 spot. So with a win today, if the Eagles want to try to get some rest for their starters going into the playoffs, how important is it for them to come out on top?
Yeah, I mean, the opportunity to have, I would call it like a DIY bye week in week 18, I think that is really important. You got to keep in mind, like the Eagles have had a lot of games in succession. They had that week 5 bye after a lot of travel early in the season. Their Thursday night game was obviously earlier in the season. They haven't had a lot of opportunities to sort of, I would say, catch their breath, in this final stretch of the year. And obviously they've been playing really well. So maybe it hasn't come up, but I think the injuries are starting to mount up a little bit, obviously with Nakobe Dean out, that's the one that, and like, you're just keeping an eye on a lot of these things. And, like AJ Brown's been managing a knee injury. I think a lot of these guys could, use that week of rest to go into the playoffs a little bit more, ready and a little bit more prepared physically. So I think that taking care of business today would be huge for them. Again, obviously Washington could do them the favor tonight, even if they lose. But yeah, I think getting locked into that 2 seed and being able to rest some of the key guys. Obviously, they can't rest everybody. Just the way that the roster machinations work, you can't have everybody out. But you can rest some of the key figures, some of the guys with the heavier workloads, and again, be ready for the postseason. And kind of, like I said, the DIY buy is kind of my tagline for it, giving those guys a little bit of a break, because it has been a tough stretch for these guys. Obviously, the travel hasn't been bad, but there's been a lot of games in quick succession.
Well, speaking of one of the players who has one of the heaviest workloads in the Eagles offense, Saquon Barkley is still very much in the race to break Eric Dickerson's single season rushing record. He is just 268 yards away from breaking it. I say just, however, that's a big amount for Saquon Barkley, maybe not so much. The last week was a little bit of an interesting week for him, especially after Kenny Pickett entered the game. The Commanders defense adjusted the way that they were playing the Eagles offense and tried to take away the run, weren't as concerned by the passing game, used a lot of single high safety and loaded up the box that way. Even so, it seemed like it was more of an issue for the Eagles with their execution up front and their ability to block up the and create rushing lanes that we've been so accustomed to seeing for Barkley all season long. Ultimately, in the second half, Barkley was held to 16 carries for 27 yards, which is a staggeringly low number. When you look at today's matchup, how likely do you think it is that Barkley can take a significant step toward breaking that record against the Cowboys?
Yeah, I think that there's a good chance that that he'll have another big day. I know that the Washington, the performance against the Commanders in that second half was concerning. The run game has been so dominant all year. For them to be shut out the way that they were definitely was eye popping. But I think it was mostly circumstantial. They came in with the plan for Jalen Hurts. I think the run game was probably. I mean, the run game. I don't want to say it's centered around Jalen Hurts, but just Jalen Hurts is obviously a major part of like the schematics of the run game. I think that is fair to say. Obviously, Saquon Barkley is the focal point, but the types of runs that they can use, account for the fact that Jalen Hurts is +1 in the run game. I mean, Kenny Pickett obviously is not Jalen Hurts in terms of running ability, but he's also not statuesque back there. He's not Matthew Stafford. Remember a couple months ago we were talking about how slow Matthew Stafford was, and then I saw him have a very good scramble yesterday. Quick note, but yeah, I do. I think that the fact that they can build this run game with Kenny Pickett in mind this week, I think should be, advantageous for them. It should be able to bounce back. And I don't know. I think that the Eagles run game is pretty opponent agnostic. I think that, obviously Micah Parsons is a good player, but I think, we've seen this run game be successful against so many different types of defenses and different types of talented defensive players that I think they kind of earned the benefit of the doubt that the Washington, performance was more of a blip than, something that will be a concern going forward.
Well, the Eagles aren't the only team entering today's game with their backup quarterback in. So are the Cowboys. And we saw Cooper Rush, the Cowboys starting quarterback for today, make his first start of the season against the Eagles back in Week 10. It was nothing short of a nightmare for Cooper Rush. He went 13 for 23 completions for 45 yards, a 61.7 quarterback rating. However, he has taken some strides since then. According to Next Gen Stats, he has completed 17 of 27 downfield passes for 328 yards and 6 touchdowns in his last 3 games. Rush, he didn't attempt a pass beyond 10 yards in the last time he faced the Eagles. That said, he will not have his favorite weapon in the passing game in CeeDee Lamb at his disposal. Without Lamb, how formidable is this Cowboys passing attack really?
Yeah, no, I think that's a major hit for them. I mean, as important as A.J. Brown is to the Eagles offense, I think you could make a case that CeeDee Lamb is as important, if not maybe even more important, because of the depth that they lack behind him. They don't have like necessarily a Devontae Smith that can sort of take up some of those. They obviously don't have a Saquon Barkley. And so I really do. I think that the fact that CeeDee Lamb is out really like completely changes what they can do offensively. I mean, he's like probably on the, the fringes of the first tier of receivers in the NFL. So it's really hard to understate how important he is. It's going to be a big blow for them. I'm curious to see what the passing game looks like. Obviously, it was pretty inept the last time the Cowboys and the Eagles matched up, as you just pointed out. So yeah, I think it is definitely. I'm not optimistic about the Cowboys' chances of throwing the ball. I don't want to jinx it for the Eagles, but yeah, I do think that it's not necessarily a good prospect for them.
We will see if this is a good day for the Eagles to rebound as a defense after a really undisciplined showing last week against the Commanders. Talking to Tristan McCullum after the game, asking him about why this was such an undisciplined game. He called it a t-shirt game. Maybe perhaps there was a little bit more juice going into the game, knowing that this was potentially a game that the Eagles could clinch the division with. Ultimately, that did not happen. Today is another t-shirt game. Looking back at last week, CJ Gardner-Johnson was ejected after he incurred 2 unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. He's later fined this past weekend for that. Jalen Carter also had his 4th unnecessary roughness penalty of the season, his 2nd in as many games. There was just really some uncharacteristic penalties. We also saw a too many men penalty on the Eagles defense that ultimately led to a touchdown when Darius Slay tried to come in the game. A lot of breakdowns in the secondary, especially in the second half, really in the fourth quarter of the game. With all of that, the Eagles coming off of all of the drama of last week, how do you expect them to respond against another division rival?
Yeah, I think they're going to have to really figure out how to toe the line, is how CJ Gardner-Johnson put it. These division games are always going to be chippy. They're always going to be, tightly contested. They're going to be intense. And I think that the Eagles defense has kind of made a reputation. They've earned a reputation for being physical. They've earned a reputation for being tough by the way that they play kind of between the whistles. And then I think that they play with an edge, up until the whistle. So I think that it's fair to say like referees are probably a little bit more sensitive to that. Now that the season has worn on, we've seen things boiling over for the past couple of weeks. I think that they're trying to figure out like how to reel that in while maintaining that level of physicality that they take pride in, and that it is contributing to their success. So I'm curious to see like what it looks like for Jalen Carter and CJ Gardner-Johnson today as they try to embark on playing the way that they play without, I guess, eliciting the ire of the officials, because that is definitely something we've seen the last couple of weeks. In terms of like how they're going to perform, again, I said it about the run game. I feel like the defense has played well enough against high-level offenses, honestly, offenses with a lot more talent than this Cowboys offense has, to suggest that Washington fourth quarter was more of a blip than anything else. So, I think that today will be instructive to find out if that's actually the case. But yeah, I do. I think that the defense has played well enough to feel reasonably confident about their ability to bounce back this weekend.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's hear from you, everyone. Our favorite segment of the show, the Fan Zone. We've got some great questions and comments from all of you over on Inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. So thank you. And if we don't get to your question or comment, we will certainly be over there during the game, and we'll try to answer some of those there as well. But let's start with this one from Chris Kiefer. They say, unless the stars align and the Eagles somehow find themselves back in the number 1 seed mix, Jalen Hurts won't play again until the wild card game. Let's just say, EJ, here's the thing. First of all, I don't think that the Eagles are really going to be in the top seed mix. I think they are pretty much firmly locked into that number 2 seed. Let's say that is the case. Jalen Hurts obviously is not playing today's game. If you are Nick Sirianni and you are thinking about the long term, whatever is best for this Eagles team going into the playoffs, would you like Jalen Hurts to play a little bit in Week 18 against the New York Giants, knowing that otherwise he'd have 2 games off going into the wildcard game?
Yeah, I think it would probably make some sense to get him out there for a series or 2, even if there's nothing to play for in that Week 18 game. I think it kind of has the same sentiment as the preseason, where it's like you just kind of want him to get in the rhythm of things before the postseason. In 2022, Jalen was coming back from injury. They had something to play for. I guess like the number 1 seed was still in play for that regular season finale. So it's not exactly the same thing, but I do think that there's a reason to think like it'd be good for him to get out there. So yeah, it would not surprise me if he played in the regular season finale, even if there's nothing to play for. And I think it makes some sense to just make sure that like his last time playing isn't, when he got injured against the Commanders. So yeah, I think that there's some merit to it. I think that it makes sense. And I would not be surprised if he's cleared, if he comes back for a series or 2.
I think that is a good point, EJ. I agree with you, and we'll see exactly what they decide to do, what the picture looks like after this week's slate of games. Let's take this comment here from M. Galante. They say, I didn't see any run game adjustment against the Washington Commanders. They would like to see Kenny Pickett under center, some play action, perhaps out of under center. We really we've seen some of that from Hurts too, but that really hasn't been a huge part of the Eagles' offense either. Do you expect Kellen Moore to diversify the offense a little bit more with Pickett, or continue to play to his strengths in particular?
Yeah, I think that you just said it. I think that playing to his strengths might be under center play action. We've seen you see it across the NFL. Like under center play action can kind of simplify things for quarterbacks. Make things a lot easier for them, especially if you want to target the middle of the field. So yeah, we've seen the Eagles do some of it. I don't know if it's necessarily Jalen Hurts's. I don't know if it plays to Jalen Hurts' strengths as much because he is such a factor in the run game that shotgun runs are a little bit more advantageous for him being able to take advantage of that. With Kenny Pickett, I mean, you might make the argument that like putting him under center, he's not as much of a threat out of shotgun run, so putting him under center might be, a logical thing to do because it kind of stresses the defense more with the notion that Saquon Barkley is going to be getting downhill more quickly, with the Eagles offensive line also being able to get downhill. So I think it'd be interesting. Again, I think it could simplify things for Kenny Pickett, could kind of be the easy button for him, because I think that is probably the most important thing for this offense, and what the scheme should be this week is to just make sure that you're not asking Kenny Pickett to do too much. So I think it could be an avenue that they could go down. I think it could make some sense.
I agree with you as well. Thank you so much, M. Galante, for your comment. All right, let's move into our player picks for today. EJ, we've talked about a lot of different players and a lot of players worthy of our attention. However, if there was one you were most eager to see how they perform in today's game, who would it be?
I'm going to go with Micah Parsons. I mean, I could have just gone with Jordan Mailata, but I wanted to acknowledge that Micah Parsons lines up in different places. So, he's the guy that the Eagles are going to have to identify on every snap. We talk about that a lot. When you break the huddle, figure out where number 11 is, figure out what your plan is for him. So, I think that he is, even in a game where the Cowboys are eliminated from the playoffs, and I think that they're just coming in here for pride, and I think Micah Parsons is a prideful player, and he's the type of guy who can wreck a game even in this type of circumstance. I know that he talked earlier in the week about wanting to kind of play spoiler for the Eagles just because of the rivalry. So, again, he mostly lines up over the right tackle, but he will work against whoever he thinks he can beat at times, especially in key situations. So finding him will be important, and accounting for him will be important for the Eagles offense. So, I'm going to be doing it for myself as well. I'm going to be, making note of wherever he lines up and, the matchups that he's going to try and exploit. So yeah, he's my pick. I guess you could say Jordan Mailata if I have to go Eagles, but yeah, Micah Parsons in general.
Because of Micah Parsons, I am going with not necessarily. I mean, it is a player in this circumstance. However, I'm most intrigued by Kenny Pickett's ribs. I'm going with a body part in this in this exercise. I'm curious to see how much of a limitation there is because of his injury. If he does take a shot at any point of the game, will he be able to play through it? Will we end up seeing Tanner McKee at any point in this game? I think that's a big question, and that's something that some Eagles fans on the internet, maybe a small faction of Eagles fans, have been clamoring to see more of him, or at least see him in relief of Hurts over Pickett. We have yet to see Tanner McKee perform in a regular season game in his 2-year career with the Eagles. We've only seen him perform in the preseason, and he's had some moments. He certainly had his moments. However, he has not had his moments against a first team defense working with a first team offense either. So curious to see how Pickett holds up. When we spoke to him earlier this week and when we saw him in practice, we saw that he had a little extra protection around his abdomen. He typically wears a flak jacket, he said. However, he's using a little bit extra protection, or at least that was what he did in practice and what he plans on doing on game day. So we'll see if how well of a added boost that is for him, if that's something that continues to work, and if he is able to continue to stay healthy and functional throughout the course of the game. If not, we'll see if they have to go down the depth chart a little bit and rely on McKee in his first game of the season in which he is actually active for a game. All right, it is time for our predictions as we look into the future. I am pleased to be joined by Jeff McLean. Jeff, before you give your prediction for today's game, I am curious, what is your matchup to watch?
Jeff, I think you're muted.
There we go. I missed that. Hi, guys. Sorry about that.
That's all
No
right.
worries. I'm excited to hear what you were saying.
It's an old man mistake of not unmuting myself.
No worries.
Yeah. So, before I get to my prediction, if we look at the Eagles defense and facing this Cowboys offense, with no CD Lamb, they're going to have to be able to run the ball. And look, and I said while I was muted that this has not been a dynamic rushing attack. This hasn't been an overpowering one. Not the type of typical run game you see from a Dallas offense because they've had in the past such strong offensive lines. Don't quite have that manpower up front. But these last several weeks, Rico Dowdle has been running the ball better. They have been picking up more yards on the ground. That you could say that's because Cooper Rush has been more effective in the past, and that's opened up things on the ground. But in this game, with no CeeDee Lamb and essentially no one else for Cooper Rush to throw the ball to, in terms of there being a major threat, they're going to have to move the ball on the ground. Now, the Eagles' run defense, has been among the best in the NFL all year. They have yet to allow a rusher go over 100 yards in a game. So they've handled some really good running backs over the course of the season. Now, if you're the Cowboys, you can hang your hat a little bit on there not being a Nakobe Dean. Well, as great as Zach Bond has been this year, and certainly he's been a good run defender, Nakobe's been the stronger run defender. Will that hurt him? Will that hurt the Eagles defense? Look, they still have the manpower up front. Vic Fangio has been able to get away with not having to lean on that 5-man front. He's done it with a 4-man front. He's done it with like a penny front, which is a 5-1. And I think he can do that again in this game. But don't be surprised to see Dallas really try and hammer it on the ground to get that going for their offense.
Mm-hmm. All right, Jeff, with everything in mind that we've already reviewed, what is your final score prediction?
Yeah, Jalen Hurts is certainly going to hurt the offense. We saw that last week, but I think with a week of preparation, they can game plan for what Kenny likes to do in terms of the passing game, what he likes to do in terms of the run game. I still feel like this is a game the Eagles should win. The fact that the Dallas is without CeeDee Lamb, as you guys have talked about several times, and as I mentioned, is going to be hard for them to overcome. So I'm sticking with the Eagles. I think Kenny can get it done. I think they can come up with a game plan that plays to his strengths, and they can score enough points. And the defense, I just don't see the threat being there like it has been in certain weeks, certainly last week with Jaden Daniels at quarterback in Washington. So I'm going with the Eagles, 23-17, a relatively close one, but one I think they should win and one that should give them the NFC East.
All right, EJ, who is coming out on top in today's game?
Yeah, the fact that the Cowboys have won 4 of their last 5 gave me some pause, but when you look at the opponents that they played, I don't necessarily think that this one, I feel like the Eagles can win this one comfortably, even still, with all the injuries and everything else. So I have them winning 21-10. I usually don't predict, such lopsided division games, but I don't know. When I just look at this Cowboys offense on paper, especially without CeeDee Lamb, especially without CeeDee Lamb, I just have a hard time seeing where they're going to get point production from. Again, I could be wrong. I've been wrong definitely at times this season. So, not saying that I've been on a 100% hit rate, but yeah, I had the Eagles winning 21-10.
Haven't we all been? I am also going with the Eagles. However, I have a much closer, much lower score. I am going with Eagles 19-17. I'm kind of maybe taking more of your approach last week, EJ, just in terms of the chaoticness of the game, of these second meetings between divisional rivals. Perhaps there will be an element of chaos, but I still feel like the Eagles on paper, talent-wise, even with Hurts missing from today's game, I feel like they still possess the significant advantage. There is still a question mark around Kenny Pickett. I think he does deserve the benefit of the doubt from last week's game, coming off the bench cold with no reps with the first team offense, really at any point this season or in the preseason or in training camp, really, however you want to slice it. He has not gotten those reps with AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. I think I am expecting an improvement. How much of an improvement, I'm not so sure. So I'm keeping it a low scoring affair, with the Eagles getting the slight advantage over the Cowboys. All right, everyone, that is going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for joining us and tuning in to Inquirer Live at Gameday Central, sponsored by Borgata Hotel, Casino, and Spa. Just as a reminder, you can stick around over on Inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. if you're not already there, you can follow us with us there, follow along with the game. We will be commenting in real time, answering your questions. So we look forward to interacting with you in just a bit.
And please keep up with more Eagles coverage on my podcast, Uncovering the Birds. New episodes are released every week, although we are probably taking the holiday off this week. So we'll be back the following week after the season finale. So listen to wherever you get your podcasts or go to inquirer.com/podcasts.
Once again, that is all for today. Thanks so much for tuning into Game Day Central. We'll see you next time.